10 years after I had my program, my listening training program in Paris, I was asked to present in an international conference. In fact, a conference that took place in Toronto. It was in 1978. I was interested in trying to make people understand what it is to have dyslexia from the inside, from the experience of the person who is dyslexic. Now, at the time, the word dyslexia was used in a much wider range than we are using it now. Now, most people think of dyslexia as confusing B and D and this kind of thing. At the time, dyslexia was a kind of a blanket word which covered learning disability, which became later also ADD, ADHD, auditory processing difficulty. All these words at that time in France didn't exist. All this was dyslexia. And nothing that I could find explained what is dyslexia from the point of view of the dyslexic. Everything which was written, and a lot was written on dyslexia, always was from the point of view of the educator, of the psychologist, of the specialist, but not from the person himself. I found the idea of being dyslexic come back to me later on, after I was not only did I overcome the problem, went to university, start working, and having to go and work in another country, in another language. And the first few months and that was South Africa, I had to speak English. I had to speak English in a world which was African speaking, and the feeling, the kind of the inside taste of what I was feeling was being a foreigner, brought back the flavor of this life as a dyslexic, which made me define dyslexia as being a stranger in your own language. Now, what I will say is that having a listening problem is to be a stranger in your own country, in your own language, with your own people, and more than with other people, but with yourself. You start doubting of yourself. You start not knowing exactly who you are. Now we talk about lack of self-confidence, poor self-esteem, poor self-concept. All those terms is really experienced by the one who has a difficulty at school as who am I? Which means that a problem which seems to be at the surface, learning, reading, spelling mistakes, all those difficulties are really little by little, particularly with the onset of puberty and adolescence, are starting to become an existential problem. Who am I? Who am I? Do I connect well? Why don't I connect well with the world around me? Why people think I'm weird? Why do I think people see me as being weird? And by doing that also, I start behaving, acting, which we see very, very often with kids who have learning disability, ADHD. They are trying to be either the clown of the class, or they try to withdraw, sit at the back, do not communicate, depending if they are more on the introvert side or as the extrovert side. And we take all this as a behavioral problem. My point of view is that when you receive the world distorted, when you listening do not receive the information as it comes to you, your universe, your world is going to become distorted. That is what I meant by the Dyslexified World. I have used my experience as someone who had dyslexia and to a certain extent continue to live with those aftertaste of dyslexia. We never get completely out of the difficulty we have. We just make them work for us and not disable us. That is what I try to explain to children and to the parents of those who experience this kind of problems. We can live, and history have shown it. There are a lot of people who have succeeded having this kind of difficulties. They have another way of looking at the world. They have another perspective of things. Perhaps it has to do with the difficulties they have, which means that I always present the difficulties they have as an opportunity, as a potential opportunity if they know how to if they understand it, and of course if they work in overcome it. The good thing is, the fantastic thing is that we have something in the listening training which permit to overcome at least some of it. Which means that what I'm trying to tell the kids and the youngsters who feel odd, who feel weird, who feel inadequate, who feel foreigner in their own world, that it is not something wrong with the brain, it is not something mental, it's not something which doesn't work in the mind. It's just the perception is distorted, and the way they come out is influenced by their perception. The way they act, the way they speak is influenced by how they receive. If I receive an information too slow, for example, because my processing is too long, it's going to take me more time to think about the answer. And in a normal conversation, when I come with the answer, the other kids are already talking about something else, and I feel like a fool. Okay? I tell them all this not to worry. So it's something which can be improved. It's something which can be improved to a point that it's not going to be a problem anymore. That's my message to kids. Another problem with children who have a problem, like a learning disability, attentional deficit disorder, autism, children in the spectrum, what we were calling Asperger, socially difficult, not knowing how to fit. Some children who sometimes have difficulty with body image. They don't know how to, they don't dance well socially. They don't know how to move with a groove, so they just don't have that ability. They are, diagnosed, and they have those labels, and up to the parents, everybody sees them as those labels. Even themselves. How many times do I hear, oh yes, I do this because I'm learning disabled, or I do this because I have Asperger syndrome, which in a way is good because at least I belong to a family, I am understood. In another way is not good because nobody is looking at who am I, who is behind, the child behind. This is the one we have to connect with. Okay? Behind all those difficulties that I was describing, which for me have a lot to do, not fully, but a lot have to do with the way they perceive the world, process the world, make sense out of what they receive, and and turn it out into expression, verbal and non-verbal. There is a child, there is a person. If you can connect with that person, if you can tell that person, not only I understand you, but I like who you are, because I see all the potential there. Those things that you have a hard time right now expressing to people. I see it. I lived with it. And good for you. And we are going to try to get you out of that, to show people what you are capable of doing. My book, When Listening Comes Alive, in fact, was written 15 years after the Dyslexified World, and it was kind of an elaboration on the theme of the Dyslexified World, to explain to people what it is to live with a listening problem affecting learning, language, communication, social behavior, etc.